So yes, or rather, if you say anything that shouldn't be said, I'll make the most of it and spread it over the entire internet.
No pressure.
So anyway, so lovely to meet you, Dan, the first time because you were off.
Yeah, likewise. And sorry, I missed you when you visited.
Yeah, and so Darrell, this is Dan
Hey, Dan.
and Emily.
Hey,
Hi,
Emily.
Darrell. Nice to meet you.
Lovely to
Yeah,
meet you,
likewise.
Darren.
Hi.
So, is there anything special you want to talk about today?
I think we're happy for you to lead the conversation. We haven't really.
Oh, that's a seriously bad thing.
Take the
Darrell
credit.
saying, let me be in charge of anything is a very bad idea. But anyway, I know that you've thought quite a bit about the future, a future that Darrell and I won't see unless he invents something awful like living forever, which would be really bad. So I think we can talk something about that. But we'll start off by saying how Emily and I met. So Emily, do you want to relate that fateful day?
I was thinking when Dan said he was sorry for not being there when you visited like that, he didn't know we didn't know you were gonna arrive on the beach.
Well, I didn't know either. Yes.
Yeah. When was it? It
It's been
just
late
after winter
June.
solstice or summer solstice.
Yeah.
Yeah, like end of June, I think.
Well, basically, I was paddling around Ireland, and I'd done the whole of the East Coast and the whole of the South Coast, and I got all the way to Dingle, which is just around the corner from a place called Blasket Island, which is on the very remotest, furthest part of Europe, really. And up to Dingle, I'd had lovely weather, and I paddled every day, and I'd had exactly one shower. But then all meteorological disasters happened constantly for the next 2 months. So I was stuck in Dingle for 3 days, and I thought, well, I'm a heroic kayaker. I can't stay here forever. So I finally ventured out with no intention of going to the island. And I battled my way against enormous waves and a nasty headwind. Got to the island, which I had no intention of going to, because it was a southerly wind. I saw across the strait, the channel there, which is quite dodgy because the tidal flows and etc. This lovely beach, which was sheltered and everything. So I paddled there and crash landed.
And at the
that's
time,
when that's when you spotted me, isn't it?
Yeah, we were like kind of stormed in on the island. So the last visitors had been dropped off, knowing that they wouldn't be able to leave for the next 3 days. So they all had changed their bookings, and it was, I think, a family with one little girl and 2 other groups. I can't remember. So 3 families but there was basically 8 people. So I knew that was the amount of people on the island and there was no more. And for the 3 days, that was it. And my cousin Jack was staying with me while Dan was away fishing. So Dan had just left and these families came on, and we were kind of delighted when the weather does that, because it means that you also have a lot of free time. The guests are there, like you're just like you get to know them and help them out if they need it, but there's not lots of check-ins or day visitors or anything, so it's really special because you have the whole place to yourself. But I think like you're always doing a little mini head count that you've seen everyone that day, kind of, or something.
That's
like
you being mother hen then, isn't it? Counting the chickens.
It was the evening, I think, and we went down for a swim, Jack and I had seen like 3 of the people, and I remember seeing 2 more coming down the hill, and then we got to the beach and saw the rest of everyone else. And then Jack said, oh, I think I just saw like a tall skinny man. behind the cove of the beach, and I was like, don't freak me out, like we're here on our own, you know. I ghost stories with the island, and he was like, no, I swear. And then the family said, there is a man over there, there's a man who landed on the beach in a kayak, and we were like, what? So then we went over and met a very windswept Mikey. And I think the first thing you said was something like, oh, I hope you didn't see that landing, did you?
It was. I thought I'd be told off as well. I was glad you weren't carrying a shotgun or anything like that.
No, we were delighted to see you. So yeah, then I suppose then the next question was like, you were like, oh, I might stop here and have my dinner and then continue. And we were thinking like, oh my goodness, does he know the storms that are coming? And that stretch of water, that what you're speaking of, the Blasket Sound, is like notorious for being really dangerous. So yeah, we were.
And the name Blasket comes from a Norwegian word called hidden reef. So historically, I think 40 or so shipwrecks in that strait, and yeah, it's very treacherous because all the tide rushes through the pinch point between the Long Island and the mainland. So you can really see the tide when it comes in and out.
Well, you felt it, Mike. You.
Yeah, well, that's nothing to me. I love that space of danger. So, but anyway, I think for the benefit of our listeners, we better kind of rewind, because we need to know a little bit about you two guys and how on earth you ended up on the edge of Europe.
Yeah, it was very kind of.
Well, previously we were living in London. Emily was working as a nurse, and I was working as a civil engineer. Both sort of starting to think about a move out of London. We weren't quite sure where, but getting a bit fed up of the rat race and living in a busy city. So,
and I think we spent all of our time off trying to get out of London or going somewhere with a big space, or so that kind of was a big realization that actually if we lived in a place like that, we wouldn't have to spend all our free time trying to get
so Emily, where you're obviously from Ireland, and were you brought up in a rural location?
Well, I was born I'm from Bandon, which is like a little town in Ireland, so it's not rural, but it's not a big city by any means.
But you didn't have to drive for an hour to get to a field and milk the cows.
No, we're fairly close to everything, and we were really lucky because we're very close to the coast. So I spent my childhood kind of at the beach, which was really nice. So I think, and Dan, you did a lot of loads of fishing growing up and spent most of your childhood outdoors as well. So I think we both kind of had those roots anyway. And then we I think it was something that we said, oh, at some stage we would really like to move, but we were in the middle of doing up Dan's flat. This was
it would be February 23.
Yeah.
So what was it a common theme for your friends to escape from London to this dream of green countryside and constant
most of our
rain?
friends were actually living in. I mean, you had a big group of friends that were living in Ireland, living in London. Most of my friends from growing up, from school or from university, were living in and around London. And then it was one Sunday, Emily was working an overtime shift in a hospital, doing late night, and she just sent me this ad, and it was for the job on the island, and it was just a bit of a pipe dream idea, saying, oh, could we apply for this? They're looking for a couple to go live on this remote island and just.
Well, I thought Dan would just laugh at the whole concept, so I sent it. Please, can we? And then I was really surprised when he was like, yeah, okay. I was like, oh.
So we applied, didn't think anything of it, and
it's kind of, it gets a good bit of press every year, and usually gets I think they said I don't know, 250,000 applicants.
I think in the last 5 years there was 150,000 applicants.
Yeah, something.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I think nowadays they limit the number of applications because otherwise, it's not possible to read them all.
But that kept our expectations low.
Yes, and we applied. We didn't expect anything to come of it.
So when you did apply, did you kind of plan the application so you could sell yourselves to the maximum extent.
Pretty much. I mean,
I think
you know, Emily being a nurse and me being an engineer, quite practical skills, useful skills to have on remote island. So,
and I remember thinking like, oh, what will give us a bit of an edge? Like, what would make it interesting? So I made a video just of clips of us because I was like, oh, maybe that will stand out if there's loads of emails.
Ah, right,
Brilliant.
okay. So it wasn't just potluck then.
No, but I think that Billy and Alice probably cursed us for that because then this year lots of people have been asking us like, oh, have you got any tips for our application? And I've been like, video worked for us.
Yeah.
Do a video. Maybe this year they got lots of videos.
yeah. And I remember it being something that we could try and just portray who we were as people in a short, succinct way. So that might have helped a little bit.
Yeah, but I think a lot of it was just luck as well.
But then we got an email to say they wanted to have an interview with us, which we were over the moon with. And then from that point onwards, we were just visualizing ourselves doing it.
Oh, really? You told me before. You got it. That's not good.
Yeah. And so we did the interview and we didn't hear anything for about a week and a half. And then it was a Monday morning. We were actually both taking the week off work to do a week of renovations, which were daunting a little bit. And I got an email to say, "Oh, we'd love to have you as the caretakers." So we literally like screamed and jumped out of bed, and
then we were like, "Oh my goodness, we have so much to do."
Yeah.
Because I think the time frame was like 8 weeks, or
I think it was 6. I think we probably had about 6 months of work left.
On the flat.
Yeah.
Right.
On the flat, and now 6 weeks to do it before we had to leave. So it was very stressful to get it done, but yeah, it was.
Oh, it was so exciting though, and even like telling our families, they were like, "What is going on?" Like, it was just really, really. It's such a nice, exciting time, just like that. Like, what are we getting ourselves in for? And
I think both of our families actually, we've always been a little, but we've always been a little bit adventurous, and I think both of our families are sort of like, "Oh, of course you're going to live on a remote."
Right. Okay. So Emily, I seem to recall that during the interview, your mother was giving you a helping hand. Is that like to relate that to everybody?
So for the interview, my mom was visiting for the weekend anyway, and yeah, she was overseeing Dan's place and giving her opinion of it all, and then we had to do the interview in the middle of that. And she was like, "Don't worry," the classic Irish mammy, like, "You won't know I'm here. You won't hear peep." And she sat in the sitting room downstairs, and we were on like a little like mezzanine, like with the desk there just between the bedrooms, so she could hear everything we were saying quite well, and we could see her like from above. And she got the roller beads out straight away anyway when the Zoom call started. And then I was like, that's fine as long as she doesn't pipe in. And then like we would be like blah, blah, answering the questions, and she'd be like, "Don't forget to tell them." So she added to the interview. She gave her a special touch. But no, she was honestly such a lifesaver when we were on the island, because anything we needed, she'd be like, "Right, I'll add it to the bag," and she'd come over with a giant suitcase every couple of weeks.
Well, I think that rosary might have been the tipping point, actually.
Yeah, definitely. She is very good. And even now, if there's ever anything we want, or like just like we're like, "Oh, I'd love to get that job or something," we're like, "Mom, light the candles."
So when I arrived on the island, I had a fantastic welcome, and I ended up staying there a whole day, and I potted off the next day, and I was utterly spoiled. And Jack and Emily and I got on really well, just strangely well. So that was very nice, and I had lots of good tales. So
really special, yeah.
So I recall that when your arrival on the island was pretty grim, really, because it wasn't, the place that you had to stay was not in the best of condition. Because essentially, nobody lives on the island at all over the winter.
Yeah, for 6 months. So yeah, you can imagine a small cottage with single pane windows and doors that aren't really that airtight. Left for 6 months with no heating on. Takes quite a few weeks to air out and get the damp out of the house. So
Yeah.
yeah, you
And
arrive
all
and it's a bit of a shock.
living creatures.
Yeah, and we were there over the summer, but early April, it's still quite cold, and there was a few storms that came in, so it was probably below 10 degrees for most of the first few weeks. It was quite a shock going from nice dry house with central heating to
Oh, yeah.
house on the edge of the Atlantic with no central heating.
It was a big shock to the system,
Yeah.
but we got stuck in and
Pretty much cleaned for 2 weeks and
Yeah.
just got rid of all spiders' webs and
dropping.
Right.
So, and your main job on the island was because there's a couple of houses that are rented out there for holiday makers, and when the weather permits, there's one or two boats come over from the mainland with 400 visitors a day that you have to sell them tea and
Very.
cake.
Yeah, so I mean that was our purpose of being there from Billy and Alice's perspective, is to do the changeovers, take care of the guests if they've got any needs while they're there. I mean, more or less it's they're left to their own devices, but something can always go wrong. And then there's day visitors that come over. I think probably the busiest day of the year was maybe 200 people, which doesn't sound like very much, but when you're spending the rest of your days with a handful of people, that can be a bit of a shock to the system. So
It's a small space. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's so much history. It's people come over and they've read all the books. There was a lot of authors that lived on the island when it was inhabited up until 1953. So it's a really magical place, just in terms of the wildlife and the environment, but with all the history as well, people do really become sort of entranced by the beauty of it.
Well, to give Darrell an idea, because Darrell lives not far from Lundy Island, so it's a bit like Lundy Island, but it's Lundy's inhabited all the year round, doesn't it? It's got a pub and
It's got 25 people over there. So the pub, there's a shop, and there's a church which gets occasional church services as well. But because it's in the Bristol Channel, it's quite sheltered, I would say. So I'm just looking at the map of where you are, and it's look garily exposed
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah,
it was.
And what was quite a big shock when we first saw the island. I mean, we saw various photos and videos, but you don't quite get a sense of the shape of it, and it's literally a mountain that comes out of the sea. I mean, it's only a kilometre wide, but it's the highest point is almost 300 meters high. So the area we lived in was east facing. So when the southwesterly winds and storms come in, you're more or less sheltered by.
You're tucked in under the mountain, kind of, and that's obviously where they built, because the house we were in was built originally for the islanders, so that's kind of why they were where they were. Thank goodness, because that even felt very wild. Yeah.
Anyway, I seem to remember you saying something about when there was a storm one day, there was lambs flying past the window.
Almost,
Yeah.
I do
It's funny.
wonder how they all stay on the island.
Well, there was a handful of sheep that did unfortunately fall off the cliffs. Not, I don't think by wind, but just.
But yeah, they'll chase the grass and not think about it. And then there was one that we rescued, a little lamb that had fallen onto the beach, a different beach to the main beach that you accessed, Mike. But he had fallen onto a beach, so we had to go with Billy on the boat, get the lamb and bring him back. And then we were keeping an eye on him because he broke his leg. And the week later, we saw him at the very edge of the same cliff eating grass from up there. So yeah, they're not the brightest. Yeah.
So well, that was one of the kind of overriding memories. Is the stench of death as I landed on the island, because there's this quite. There's nothing to do with you, Emily. I can assure you that. But there is an enormous seal colony. In fact, when I was paddling over, I was wondering why somebody had put a line of granite rocks in the middle of the beach, and it turned out to be close on 1,000 seals all lined up, basking, that hadn't been disturbed by the tourists, as they unfortunately tend to do. And there was one or two dead ones floating around, or not floating around, on the beach, and it was that smell of decay there, which is something that in our modern tidied away lives you don't encounter that much. So did you have other kind of experiences like that where you're thinking, this is not something I would have come across in central London?
I think it's funny that you say that, actually, because I think my memory kind of blurred that out, but you're right, it absolutely stunk. And actually I think Billy ended up burying it after a while, because I suppose it's a place where it's so beautiful that you don't want to change or do anything. So even like moving that dead seal, and it's like an amazing thing for like adults definitely, but children to witness, like the skull of a seal, or like what, because obviously you shouldn't get very close to the living seals, but the ones that die usually get swept up a different part of the beach. So like you're right that we're so sheltered from things like that. And I remember when we arrived, obviously the lambs are born around April time, but there's no farmers out there until we get out there, and we're not farmers, but it's very much like nature takes its course. And I remember thinking, like, we were like, oh my goodness, it's so sad that like some of the lambs don't make it, and we'd be out for a walk and you'd find a little lamb that might have been abandoned or for whatever reason didn't live, and we were like distraught over this because you're so sheltered from it.
It's funny because you'd have people come over for the day, and they'd walk around the island and they'd say, oh my god, we saw about 5 dead sheep on the path. And it's like, well, yeah, the island's not inhabited for 6 months and they left their own devices, so that's just nature taking nature's course.
Yeah, and like the survival rates of in nature is much lower than what we kind of think. So that was a big wake-up call for us. And I think then we were kind of like, oh, wait a minute, actually, humans didn't all used to survive.
Yeah, I remember looking at the data, and I think from early 20th century, I think the mortality rate for infants was something like 40%.
Which is probably what the land,
gosh,
and we
forget modern medicine. You completely forget, like.
So it's quite common that animals like seals, that they've got a 40% mortality rate. It's just part of nature.
But you forget very easily.
So you had a lot of time to think about life, really, and what you wanted to do with your life. So what thoughts came into your head?
I think we never regretted it, really. I think we were really glad of the break, and we were so grateful to be where we were. I think we were always very aware of like how lucky we were to be the only 2 people in a world where, like, it's getting very, very overcrowded. We were the only 2 people on a little stretch of island. That was really lucky. And I think, that kind of just makes you think about everything a bit more, really.
I think the ability to choose how you spend your time is such a luxury that it's quite easy to fall into the situation where you're having to work to pay the bills and save some money. So what we've taken from that experience is a hope in the not maybe such a short-term period, but over the next few years, to get to a point where we can be in a position to have the luxury of choosing exactly how to spend our time. So that's a mid to long-term goal.
And I think
For
the
us.
resources, like we were suddenly, our only needs were water and food and warmth, and that was it. And like it really humbles you because like a bird got into the water supply at one stage, and it was just like, right, everything stops until we get clean water again, because
Yeah,
that is so important. And I think it just reminds you, yeah, that
And actually, you just don't really need that much to be happy, you know. So just enjoying the simpler things in life, being active, eating well, you know.
eating your dinner outside, you know that, Mike, that was like a
Well,
hot meal
it's
outside was delicious.
and just such an amazing view, and
Yeah.
the fact that you had that to yourselves so often. So, would you like to explain to people the kind of logistics of living on an island, how you got food and other supplies to you?
So everything comes on and off the island from a boat. So
And
Billy,
it's not a very big boat either, is it? Because you don't have a proper
no,
harbour.
only space for about 12 people. So, and when a storm comes in, you're completely cut off from any supplies. Actually, towards the end of the year, there was a big storm that came in for about 2 weeks, and it happened to be my birthday, my 30th birthday, which was really special to spend on the island, and especially sort of have the place to ourselves. But the luxury of having fresh fruit and veg, there weren't any boats due to land, but fortunately, one of the boat operators kindly packed up a waterproof bag on the end of a rope, and threw it into threw me a rope so we could get our groceries.
Get this food bag, yeah. So like because we were stuck there for, I think it was like the bones of 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Which was lovely. It was really nice. But yeah, that bag it was literally just lettuce and fresh tomatoes, I think. Was the best birthday present.
Yeah.
So yeah, the boat when the weather is good can come back and forth a couple of times a day even. And in the height of the summer, that's mostly what happened. So you'd always get, like could get some like fresh milk for the cafe, some ice to keep it cold, things like that, because we had a generator for hoovering, and we had a wind turbine for to charge a device or something like that. We couldn't plug anything in. We didn't have electricity lights, so we couldn't have a freezer or a fridge, which was quite hard in the summertime. But we kind of found ways around everything.
And all our water came from there's I think 26 springs on the island. So in the summer, the spring sort of behind our cottage would dry out, so we'd have to pump water from over the other side of the mountain. So
we I mostly did the supervising, but I like that you give me the credit.
So that's where your sewage credentials came in.
Exactly, yeah.
But yeah, we learned so much, and yeah, it was really just so enjoyable. But yeah, that was the only, and then if there was an emergency, the Coast Guard would have to come. Which one day there was someone got unwell, and that kind of just shows you what an incredible, like the lifeboats came out to help this lady. She's absolutely fine, luckily, but it was like such a reminder of how isolated you are out there, and then when you do need help, how incredible those services are. And you know, it's just volunteer people who can come and on their Sunday and come and help someone in need. It was really good in that sense. We saw that side of it as well. But yeah, it was, I suppose every island is different, and accessing that island is particularly difficult. And that's why it's closed for the winter months. But lots of people, like when it was inhabited, people lived there all through the year. So even where the houses are situated, for the winter, the sun doesn't rise over the mountain like at all. It doesn't get past the.
So between November and February, they wouldn't have any sun on their houses, which I can imagine was very bleak.
Yeah.
So it's an iconic place in Ireland. It kind of represents a lot of heritage and the spirit of Ireland. And well, so you're fairly active on Instagram, on the old social media, and you became, well, would you say you became minor celebrities?
I think that's very generous.
I think maybe to our family and friends.
Yeah.
Well, you had two television programs made about you, is that correct?
Maybe not made about it. We were really lucky we got to be in so one of the Wild Islands of Ireland, T.G. Caher documentary series that they went from the top of Ireland to the bottom and visited all the islands there. And then the other one
on the Today Show as well.
oh yeah, we were on the Today Show as well, which is kind of like the equivalent
BBC
of
breakfast
yeah.
thing.
And
Oh,
then,
right. Who
then-
was the presenters? Who were the presenters for that one?
This very funny and flamboyant guy called James Patrice.
he's amazing.
He's
Yeah.
a Irish TV personality, and he's I'd say more of a city boy.
So did they actually come over to see you, or what?
Yeah,
He did.
yeah, came over, and yeah, they had a crew of I think 3 or 4 people as well. So that was our first experience. That was right at the start actually, because
Okay.
it's usually there's usually sort of a few news articles about the new caretakers for the year, and just so happened that this year they wanted to do a TV interview. So
I think there's just such a natural interest in it because, like, you know, remote island that 2 people get to live on, it sparks your interest, and I think that's kind of why so many people are kind of interested to hear more about it. And then there's like there's no electricity, how can you survive through that? So I think that does just kind of pique people's interest. So, and we really just were like, oh, let's lean into it. Like like we've never been on TV before. We'll just take every experience as it comes. Yeah. So like, it was very cringeworthy when the first TV camera came and they're on you like this and it's so unnatural. We both were like, it's an experience.
It was also a real insight. You know, there was a handful of news articles on us becoming the new caretakers for the year, and just quite clear that one news organisation obviously just reads the previous article and will sort of copy over the facts and
Chinese whispers.
Real Chinese whispers. So it really sort of highlights that.
Well, we got married apparently.
Yeah. One article was we were married, and then every article after that we were.
I think Dan was Irish in some, and I was English in others. I don't want to put the details, but and then we were really lucky. Ben Fogle came over to do his New Lives in the Wild series. So I think they had been interested in filming on the island for a couple of years. And when we chatted to Billy and Alice, we were like, yeah, that sounds amazing. Like, and I don't know if you've seen the series. It's a really lovely kind of documentary series that they've done like 18 seasons now or something.
Oh, really? I've only seen your programme, unless you'll link to it on the...
It's much more interesting people.
Oh, I don't believe that for a second.
But he's gone all over the world. He's filmed over 100 episodes now. So he's seen it all and done it all.
And it's really unique because they bring more or less like it's the same group of people that come to film it. So they've only got 2 camera guys and a sound guy, and then the producer and director. So it's a small group, and they all like have great crack and great banter and amazing stories because they've been to the most remote parts of the world. So, you know, our stories would be like, oh, and remember that time in London, la la la, and then they'd be like, remember in, you know, I don't know, East Tibet when you got bitten by the scorpion.
That was a really brilliant experience. It's just a really good laugh, and Ben's such a lovely guy. So it's nice to have that documentary as a bit of a record of our time experience on the island.
Even though we can't watch it without cringing.
So you also had a fairly important political visitor, didn't you?
Oh yeah, the Taoiseach came as well. Well, their previous Taoiseach.
Yeah.
Leo Varadkar, he came.
That was towards the end of this season, and with a few ministers as well.
Yeah, I think it's kind of an exciting time for like Kerry tourism, and they've actually just announced, I read last week that they're making a a really large national park out of a lot of
National Park.
Marine National Park, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. That's
Yeah,
really
which
good
is
news.
amazing.
Yes.
And that's kind of one thing that we did over there, was try to highlight like the importance of preserving the nature there, and just kind of, you know, in any space like that, that's such a precious natural environment, that you need to have measures in place to protect it. It's quite irresponsible to cart over 100 tourists without giving them any guidelines. I think like we are definitely sheep. Like we see it in ourselves when we're in a place that we don't know. You kind of look around and see what everyone else is doing, and then that must be okay. So I think we need.
Well, I was reading an article in the Guardian about Jeremy Clarkson. You know, he's the kind of right-wing commentator. So since he's run his he's been doing this Clarkson Farm TV series, which are immensely popular, and he's had a bit of a Damascene conversion. And apparently, a lot of the previous remarks he made, like climate change was rubbish, were just jokes because he was just playing a character.
Yeah.
But he was saying, because he's got this farmhouse in the Cotswolds, and a mother turned up with her 4 children, knocked on the door, and the children just walked through the door, and she goes, "We don't mind, do you? Because you're on television." And he goes down to breakfast, and there's somebody sitting at his table because they think he's public property because he's on television. So so in terms of sheep-like behaviour,
and I mean, to nowhere near the same extent, but we experience a tiny fraction of maybe that. You know, when obviously we'd be running the cafe and people would come over and you know, say, "Oh, hi, you the caretakers," and you know, after a few weeks, you sort of get quite you know, the same questions, and you know, you do get that element of wanting to have your own space. With that being protected. So
I think in a place like that, there's not really written boundaries, so then people, you know, no one would ever knock on the door of like a Pret or Starbucks and say like, "Oh, I know you're opening in an hour, but I want a cup of tea now." No bother, we'll take it black.
I think that's the one time where Henry was doing a workout in a very rare in the living room, and the first boat came up, and we would open at 12 usually. The first boat landed at 10 that day, and you know, the guy didn't even knock, but just opened the door saying, "Oh yeah, you're open. Can I get a coffee, please?" And we said, "Oh no, sorry, we're not open until 12." He said, "Oh, go on. You know, I can see the kettle's boiled already." And she's like, "Oh, you know, we don't have any milk anyway." So he was like, "Oh, that's fine. I'll take it black." And it's just like,
and another time we got back from doing the changeovers, and the lady had helped herself. She just went into the kitchen, and we kind of like, she was walking out as we were walking back to our house, and she said she was like, "Oh, I hope you don't mind, the kettle was boiled. I helped myself. I'm used to hostels anyway, so don't worry." It's kind of lovely, and I think you can't like let it, you know, you can't be like, "Oh, how can she think?" You just have to go along with it, and just, it is such a unique place. All rules kind of fly out the window. So and it was
What did you miss being on the island?
We missed, I think that we didn't miss as much as we thought we would. And we were really lucky because a lot of our friends and family came over to visit, so we didn't really miss any, you know, people, or we weren't kind of like homesick. Well, I don't think we were homesick in that sense. I think just simple things like, a cold pint, like that would have been lovely, or ice cream on a sunny day. You know, you can only kind of have room temperature things, but we had the spring, like the water from the spring, so if you fill the sink, you could put things in there to keep it cold and stuff. And you just got adventurous, and like, you know, I think now we're back being used to it again. Like, if you don't have basil for the recipe tonight, what are you going to do? You have to go to the shop and get it. Whereas like on the island, you'd be like, "Oh, I have no basil, grand." So like, "Oh, maybe we can put in a bit of rocket." Like, you know, you just get over it, and you enjoy things. And when you do have the things that you want, you really enjoy it more. So
I think then on a personal, I mean, we were so lucky, and it really wasn't when we were quote unquote working, it wasn't a very difficult or stressful job, but our time was usually dictated by the weather. So if there was a storm, we had a day off. If it was lovely weather, then we had visitors. So I guess
structure like that.
having control and you know, the ability to choose how you spend your time was something that we just realized that, you know, when you don't have that control, it's, you know, less preferable. So I think in the future, that's something that we, I guess, realize about ourselves, that choosing how we spend our time is something that's quite important to us.
I suppose as well, though, it was a good lesson in like you can't predict what's going to come up, and like, okay, we went very primal to weather, like that was like, you know, what predicted our days, but actually I suppose it's a good lesson of like in life you don't know what the weather is going to bring or what's going to kind of crock up, so it's a good way of making you just take it day by day, and that's literally all we could do, because there's no point planning the next few days because you never knew if the boat was coming or not. So it was good in that sense. But yeah.
So going back to the fact that you made it a marine nature reserve, that is kind of fantastic, because I think you've going around Ireland, one of the experiences for me, and seeing all these, Ireland is just surrounded by lots of islands, and going back 150 years ago, they all had thriving populations. So it kind of really touched me to a certain extent to see these abandoned buildings and abandoned islands. And I think one of the key factors to that process was the invention of steam trawlers, because if you're living on a tiny bit of rock surrounded by sea and constantly cut off, you need to eat at the end of the day, and nobody's going to come along and give you free food, not back in those days. So the sea used to be abundant, but as soon as they invented steam trawlers, then they came and hoover up the fish, and now people come from all over the world and still hoover up all the fish. And I think it's been proven that having a marine reserve provides a breeding ground to replenish the stocks. So it's something I'm quite passionate about. So got off my chest now, so I'll ask you another question. So did you ever get bored?
I'd say definitely not.
No, yeah, it's funny, I think the amount of time you have, you fill it. Like we've learned to really relax.
and every day we spent on the island was very different. You know, we probably have about 30-40 stories from our brief 6 months there. So you really get a picture for these islanders that lived there and wrote books. You know, we had it very easy in comparison. You know, we had power boats coming, delivering our food every day. They had to grow their own food, or you know, sell sheep's-wool and dingle to be able to buy food and bring it across. A lot of their food would have been fish that they would have caught, and milk and potatoes. So life was very difficult for them. So you can really have an appreciation how all these stories got generated from their lifetime living on the island. But no, every day was different, and yeah, some days were threw a few curveballs and they were quite difficult, and other days were relaxing and easy. So
yeah, and I think being surrounded by the sea, going back to what you were saying, Mike, was like we really realized the importance of protecting the Irish waters, and just like, you know, in the early season we got to see basking sharks in the bay. Like we got to stand.
Oh, don't mention that.
Nice.
Just don't mention. I went around the whole of Ireland and didn't see a single basking shark, and now every time I look on Facebook, I see people I met in Ireland, and they've all got pictures of basking sharks.
I think they kind of disappeared after maybe May. I think they're more of an April-May thing, and then they go elsewhere. They've eaten all the plankton then. But yeah, and I suppose we could see, because you're constantly just staring out the window at the stretch of water, so you kind of keep a tabs on what boats are passing, and sometimes you see them releasing their bycatch before they go into the bay, and it speaks for itself. And yeah, we're kind of hesitant not to lecture about it because we very easily could.
Yeah. So here's a great link between Blasket Island and where Darrell lives on the north coast of Devon. So Ring of Bright Water, or was it Tarka the Otter? Oh, I think that was written about the rivers near you, Darrell.
I think so. Yeah, talk about it. Yeah.
So a couple of days ago, as one does, I paddled out to the Wolf Rock Lighthouse off the end of Cornwall. And when I got back, there was a guy with this huge camera, and he was doing a seal survey, and I got chatting with him. And he said the guy who wrote Ring of Bright Water wanted to set himself up at one time harvesting basking sharks. So, and he didn't do very well. Apparently, according to this guy, I have no idea whether it's true. On day one, he set out on his boat with a machine gun and sprayed the basket shark with a machine gun and failed to kill it.
Oh,
So,
wow.
They're quite tough beasts, really.
They're
It's probably not a
magnificent. Yeah.
not a very cost-effective way of killing them, really.
That's wild.
So how did I get onto that? So, and here's something that's in common with people like me who do these kind of big trips, which are very intense, and you get away from normal life for a period. The thing is, they always come to an end, don't they? So you had, there was a certain date where you had to be off the island. So tell us about that process and where you've ended up.
I think we always knew it was going to come to an end, so that was something we went into it knowing. And in some,
Well, sorry, were you tempted to try for a second term, as it were?
well, we were tempted at the beginning. We were like, we want to stay the year, you know, and like Billy and Alice are very nice, and they were kind of like, well, if you want to, you can, because they've obviously heard it all before, and they realized that by the time the 6 months is over and it starts to get cold again, all the caretakers say, no, take me on, please.
I think if you wanted to spend the winter there, you'd have to really prepare for it, because in the winter you could be off for months at a time, not just weeks.
No, but I was rather thinking of reapplying for the next year. Was that ever an option?
I think same thing. So it's like, that you can't, well, for us, I don't think we wanted to live our lives in like, 6 months of this amazing island experience, and then what do you really do for the next 6 months? You can't quite commit to something big, or it's quite a short period of time. And then also just, I suppose that it was such a unique experience, and you're living in it thinking like, this is my like summer on the Great Blasket Island, where like I want to enjoy every bit of it, and we made the very most of it. And I think for both of us, we're not very like we wouldn't like to keep doing the same thing over and over again. I think we're aware of how much there is to learn.
I think ultimately as well, we couldn't, it wasn't our place. We would like to make our own place and have a lifestyle where we could be there long term, grow our own fruit and veg. And I think we're in a phase of our life now where we're sort of planning and preparing to be able to do something long term, make our own place, live somewhere quite remote. And I think if we were to go back and do that again, it sort of means somewhat delaying our sort of longer term plans. So I think we got a taste of what we'd like to do in the future from the experience, and now we're working towards trying to achieve that plan.
Yeah, I think I was just going to say that we were ready to pass on and let someone else enjoy it, because it is such an incredible experience. But yeah, I think if we were to do it over and over again, might change things a bit.
Yeah, I think you made the right decision, because if you try and relive it the same, it's not going to be as good.
Exactly. Yeah.
So where are you now?
We're in Denmark. We're just outside of Copenhagen in a town called Verløs.
Yeah.
And
we're very lucky.
yeah.
We're living in an old Scouts hut. So we came to Denmark on the 1st of Jan, and the week after we got here, it was down to -10 and snowing. So it was very cold living in a sort of timber shack with pretty much no insulation. So
yeah, the energy rating is E. So practically not.
You went on a big sunny holiday first to
yeah,
Yeah, we did.
the
We were
Far
very
East.
yeah, we
Yeah.
went to Indonesia for a couple of months, doing lots of surfing, which is really fun. So we're really fortunate here. We're living on a lake. It's not sort of in the wilderness, but it's quite there's a lot of greenery all around.
There's deer and foxes and lots of wildlife in the garden, which is really nice, and amazing birds as well. There's so many.
So it's a peaceful place to live. But yeah, we're both back working now, saving up a bit of money for the long-term plan, really.
Right. So is it effectively, well, what is the connection with Denmark? How did you end up there?
Well, we were looking for a new start, really, and Scandinavia was quite high on the priority list. Good work-life balance, and the Scandi seem to have a lot of things figured out. So we've really enjoyed our time here so far.
It's really good health system, quite I think general happiness of the countries is overall rated very well. So that was kind of something that, from living in London, I think we loved London, but I think things there are taking a bit of a turn. I think with the state of the government at the moment, it's not really somewhere that we wanted to.
It's just very busy, and
I
think we've been back a couple of times since, and you don't get the feeling that people are that overly happy when you just look around. So I think
they're under huge pressure, like
quite,
the cost of living crisis.
Quite a difficult time in the UK as a whole, but especially in major cities where cost of living is quite a huge burden.
And the NHS is just So that's kind of what
You're kind of reverse refugees in a way.
Yeah, pretty much.
We're very, very lucky. So and I think we're really glad that we moved to Denmark. It's been such a nice kind of change, and we're learning a lot. It's a very different place.
Emily started learning Danish.
I'm studying.
Oh my goodness!
Right, blimey.
Because to work as a nurse here, I have to speak Danish, so that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm nannying for a Norwegian family and then learning Danish in the evenings. So that's been a real shock to my brain to go back to the classroom.
So is it all good? The Danish life?
Yeah, I think they are very they're quite practical people, and it's a very small population, so it's quite nice, and you never feel kind of crowded and I think it's very I think a lot of their lives are very outdoors based, and the children are kind of raised in the outdoors, and they're fairly.
They've got a lot of things figured out.
Obviously, nowhere is perfect.
No. And I'm working in construction, so I'm working on an international project. So it's quite a fast-paced project. There's quite a lot of stress. So it's not necessarily something that's sustainable for the next 10, 20 years in terms of stress levels. But it's fine for the moment, and it's sort of what we're working towards longer term. But hopefully longer term, a little bit less stress.
So I'm going to tell you something that really blew my mind, okay, relating to different places to live and work. So I was over in Holland for a week to see my baby grandson. That's all. Nice. And my eldest son got sort of married. He got registered, for whatever that means. So because they are now proud parents. But anyway, we had this meal, and I was talking to I think she's probably a relative now. I won't name any names. But she said she worked in Las Vegas for a couple of years, and it was the best working environment she'd had, and you made the best friends there. And I was, because Holland's really got its act together. It's absolutely immaculate. You come back to England, everything seems a bit shabby. So this was not what I expected, really, because Holland's got a bit of the Scandi vibe in terms of people are pretty well looked after and everything's well organised. And so she was saying that in that area, which is pretty kind of conservative, they brought in a right to work law, which basically meant that you could be fired for any reason at any time with no notice. So that had the consequence of giving everybody pulling together, because they had this constant fear they could be sacked at any time. So I guess this is only one small anecdote, but in their case, and they were lots. It's very kind of ethnically diverse workforce there, as she was working in accounts. But everyone, because they knew they were living on this kind of razor edge, that everybody looked out for each other and they really kind of bonded. The thing is, if you were ill or that was it. You just get kicked out and be no support, and you wouldn't. Goodness knows what they do in those circumstances. So I just thought that kind of, I think before that, I would look at the Scandi countries as being the ideal, and they're always come out as the surveys. But there is something lost in overprotecting people and taking away all the challenges from life, which is maybe what you've found to some extent living on an island, on your own wits.
Yeah. So I guess, if you don't have some sort of adversity, well, I think putting it the other way, when you've got adversity, you tend to make quite strong connections and strong experiences with people. And I think probably both had times in our working career where there's been a lot of adversity and had those same things. Emily was a nurse working in London during COVID, and you and your housemates who are all nurses. I think you'd, without speaking on your behalf, always look back on that time, maybe not necessarily entirely fondly, but I'm sure you had happy memories in that.
Yeah, you do, pull together, and you get that sense of community, and it definitely strengthens relationships and gives you kind of weirdly good and bad memories. And I actually was listening to a podcast the other day, we both just listened to it. It's Mo Gaudet, who's kind of self-proclaimed happiness expert. He's a really interesting guy, and he was on the Stephen Bartlett podcast.
Oh yeah.
And
the CEO, I love him.
Yeah, he's brilliant.
But he was speaking about that he goes around. He lost his son when his son was 18 years old, and it's a very traumatic event for him, and it made him reflect on life and reflect on the chemistry of happiness. And he wrote a book called Solve for Happiness, which is about kind of the formula to happiness and how you can trick your brain to being happy no matter what situation. It kind of talks about this. I'm not giving it.
No, you're doing
ever so well. You're doing ever so well.
But in it, he said that a part of when he goes around giving these talks, he says to the audience, out of all of the bad times in your life and the really hard, really bad things,
think of the most traumatic experience in your life.
And then if a magic genie said, okay, we can take that away, the really bad thing or the really bad things never happened, but all of the things that came from that and the strength you got from that, and anything associated with that bad thing is also erased. And so for him, that was the loss of his son. And he said he was brought to tears on stage because a woman kind of, you know, put the question back on him and said, so are you sick? So the statistic he was giving was that 96% of people or something would say, oh, actually, no, I wouldn't erase the bad thing. You know, I'm glad for what it has given me, or something like that. And he answered the question himself about the loss of his son. And so he said, like, you know, actually, he can see now what's come from it is like that he's kind of trying to make 1 million people happier in life. And it's obviously, it's kind of a very complex question, and it can be triggering, but it's really interesting because I think it does make you realize that life is the hard bits as well. And yeah, you are a product of all of your kind of challenging times.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that you can take from adversity. It's just really interesting that, you know, in his experience, when he's asked people that question, that 96% of people wouldn't take away that bad thing. And often he says that, you know, there were really traumatic experiences, some of the things these people had been through, but even then they would still not push that magic button.
But a big but. I would say we shouldn't cause any trauma on people just because of that. So what you're saying, Mike, like that, if you take away all the problems, that people won't be as happy. I think people still have problems here. Obviously, that will always be.
Yeah. People are pretty good at coming up with problems without any external aid.
Isn't a good thing either. But yeah.
So Darrell, would you, if you had the chance, take away your experience of giving me a driving lesson, for instance?
Take that away. Yeah, I still wake up with a cold sweat at night, remembering it. Driving towards a roundabout on a dual carriageway and saying brake, and you mistaking accelerator and brake pedal, and accelerating into the roundabout. Yes, that was not good.
Well, the story ended happily anyway. I didn't mean to do it. So just looking at the world, this is a bit change of theme here. If I compared the outlook when I was your age, that would have been 1980 something. There was lots of wildlife programs going on about how all the animals were disappearing and stuff like that. But generally, you know, lots of good things were happening. Seatbelts were coming in. People were stopping smoking. There was a great big. You should have seen the debate that went on there. You know, the tobacco companies were absolutely denying that it was harmful for your health. The Berlin Wall was falling. Democracy was rising. We had the Tony Blair years, and you know, things can only get better. And claim that history was over. It certainly seemed to be an optimistic time. So how would you describe this time to your 60-year-old self?
A great question.
Wow.
That is a very interesting question.
I mean, there's no doubt that the world is going to be an incredibly different place in 60 years' time, did you say?
No, 30 years. 30 years
In
time.
30 years' time.
60, yes.
Well,
yeah.
Very optimistic in 60 years.
I was going to say, but yeah, there's no doubt the world's going to be a very different place in 30 years' time. Climate change, AI, unrest,
overpopulation.
yeah. So I think it's quite easy to get wrapped up when you look at the news and social media that there's a lot of bad things happening in the world. We actually had this discussion the other night, that is it a case that there's a lot more worse bad things happening in the world at the moment, or is it just because we're more hyper aware because of social media? You know, if you think back 10 years ago, I think there was obviously things that were happening in the world, but generally wasn't that bad.
Well, I suppose we're at a different age as well.
Yeah.
Like, so maybe now it seems more prevalent because we're just more aware of that, like we're more interested in the world news as well. But yeah, it's difficult. I think watching the news is, I just really try to avoid it because it really gets me down, and it kind of makes you lose faith in humanity. And generally, I suppose it's all the bad stories that are told because they get the attention. And yeah,
ultimately, philosophically, I think it's natural that the human brain looks at history through rose-tinted glasses. And, I think it's quite easy, particularly in your own life, to remember the positive elements of history versus the negative aspects.
Yeah, well, I think what started us talking about it was that we saw a clip from Jimmy Carr, and he was saying that it was a really powerful quote. I'm definitely going to get it wrong, but something like that we're living in objectively the easiest time to survive and be alive, and subjectively the unhappiest time, or like the worst time to be alive. There's so much unhappiness, and people really, really struggling, either like mentally or just like with like financially. Like the health of people is generally getting a lot worse. And like he was saying that, every time he gets in the shower, he tries to tell himself 100 years ago, no one had an instant hot shower. That is such a luxury that we all have, a lot of people have now, that we completely take for granted. So it's interesting because I think like the more we get and the luckier we are, the more problems humanity seems to create. So yeah.
I mean, we try and be very grateful. I mean, realistically, all of us are probably in the luckiest 1% of the people in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, we try and stay grateful for the luck that we have, just where we are in life and in the world. I think, to answer your question, to what would we tell ourselves in 30 years? In 30 years' time, I think if we said to ourselves, would you take away all your worldly possessions to have the health and youth and vitality that you have today, you'd probably say yes. So I guess just making the most of life and being active and being healthy, and yeah, probably things won't be as bad as the news says it's going to be.
Hopefully.
Yeah, well, I think that's very sage advice. I'm just also thinking. I was listening to the rest is history about the evacuation of Vietnam and the simultaneous fall of Cambodia, and how they were saying they were totally let down by America. And you look at the parallels to what's going on now in various places. So it wasn't exactly a bed of roses back in the old days, and you had the CND marches. So I think people were worrying. The worrying type were worrying about that rather than climate change or biodiversity or lots of other things. So, so what is your ideal life that you're working towards right now? Give us a picture of it.
I think, like, it will sound daft, but it's living somewhere surrounded by nature where we can grow our own food and hopefully be self-sustainable. So
I've got a great interest in architecture and an engineer. So a timber cabin in the woods that I've completely designed and built ourselves. Self-sufficient in terms of using renewable energy to power, growing lots of our own fruit and veg, and it just being I'd say I'm quite affected by my surroundings, so just nice palatial living space, nothing too grandiose, but
yeah, nothing crazy, just simple, just something of our own that we don't have to worry about it being taken away or whatever. But yeah, I think that's the dream. We always say like, when we're in the dream house, we can, grow strawberries or whatever it is. Yeah. But we're really very lucky where we are. We got so lucky to find this, as Dan called it, a shack. It's it's a really lovely, it was a scout hut, so it was built in the earliest part of it is from 1910. And when it came up on the kind of like property website, the rental website, the landlord said like, oh no, like, just to warn you, you're not going to want it. Like, he was basically
Oh, really?
off, and he put up terrible pictures of it because he said he doesn't want tenants who are going to complain about every little thing, because there's lots of little quirks with it and lots of little things. And when we told him about the island, he said, oh yeah, okay, perfect, you can have it. He knew we wouldn't be fussy and that we'd fix or try and fix anything that did go wrong. So it worked out really well in our favor in that sense. I think that felt a bit meant to be. And now we have a lake at the bottom of the garden, which is crazy. Like, we're so
Oh,
lucky.
you were dipping in that through the ice, did I
Yeah.
see?
It was amazing.
And we actually jumped in, just did a complete dive bomb today. So that's the first time.
And it's
pretty
still
submerged.
about like 2 or 3 degrees, probably. It's freezing.
Oh, is it all? That's a bit cold.
It's lovely.
So
It's nice.
Darrell, before we wind up, have you got any questions?
I guess it's maybe a similar question.
Darrell.
No. Well, Dan's got a question. Go for it, Dan.
Sorry.
Keep
I was
going, Dan.
about to apologise because we really hogged the mic, Darrell. So I was about to say, I'm glad I hear your voice. And then Dan.
Dan, keep going.
No, you go ahead. I'll ask my question afterwards.
No, I was going to say that I've got an acre of ground which is unused at the moment. So I'm desperate to build an eco ham on it, but my other half is not so interested. So we should discuss at some point, how we can get you to help design it, because the ambition will be to not be connected to any main services, so completely off grid, etc.
Amazing.
Well, I can come and live in your garden. That would solve all the problems.
Does that mean I wouldn't have to mow the orchard anymore?
Well, exactly. You can. That's a fair deal. That's a fair deal. You get more, give them a house, and you get your grass cut. So Dan, what were you going to say?
I was just going to ask. It's maybe a similar trajectory of your question, but have you got any life advice or a way that wisdom you could impart on us for living our life in the future?
Oh gosh, that is a very good question. So I've got a very good response to this, which is Darrell can answer first.
I like it.
So a few years ago, I was trying to find the survey. It was an online survey of which country should you be living in, and I came up with Denmark when I answered all the questions, which was great because I do occasionally come over to Denmark to work, and I do love the culture. Then, as you said earlier, I think it's a population that's got life sus pretty much. So the challenge was that my other half, she didn't get Denmark in the survey. I think she got Canada or something. So the end result was we stay here. But I think, if I could choose again, I think I do like Scandinavia. It depends what you want from life, but I think I'm in the innovation world, and there's no doubt from that perspective that Asia is the place. I think this is Asia's century. Maybe China the first half and India the second half. And if that's the lifestyle that you're interested in, I'll say my work is innovation. That's what I love doing. That's where I would be. Whereas I think in this part of the world, it's funny. I do sessions with multinational companies, and whenever you're in Europe or the US and you're trying to get people to generate ideas, it's always all the reasons why you can't do something. But in Asia, it's the complete opposite of that. It's people are full of ideas and everything's possible, and I think that's a great environment to be in. But I think Scandinavia is pretty close to that. If you're going to pick apart in the West.
So Darrell, did you see the video I sent you? he wouldn't have looked at it because he ignores all my emails.
Well, you sent me about 300 videos. I don't know how you've managed to spend the time trawling the whole of YouTube. So which one are you thinking about?
Well, listen, my dad's, who's living with me now, is fascinated by these. It's basically somewhere out in Pakistan or something where there's a load of engineering workshops just in a normal street, and basically they were making a 8-foot diameter gear wheel, and they start by digging a hole and then making a cast using sand and the most primitive tools, and then chucking a load of scrap metal in a kiln. They're all running around in slippers and no gloves and things like that. And then they've got big lathes and things, and it's just, talk about not knowing, not saying it can't be done. It is just the most incredible thing. People using their ingenuity and the most basic implements to produce incredible things.
Yeah, we've done little projects with the honeybee network in India. That sounds like a very similar thing. Yeah, I mean, amazing. Yeah, so people with literally no monetary resources at all. So you just get to be very resourceful in terms of just finding anything. And it sounds a bit like your Blasket Island experience. Actually, you've just got very little around you. You have to become very, very resourceful. And just done some absolutely incredible things.
So right, here comes Conroy wisdom. Making it up. It's not as good as Darrell's, but it'll do. So what I've found is you quite often set a goal, and if you're halfway sensible, that goal is set based on your current capabilities and resources and what you want to do at the time. And there's probably quite a lot of things that you'd quite like to do, but you've taken them off the list because they're not sensible. They're out of reach. Yeah. And I think it's a good idea every now and again just to kind of assess where you're going, because sometimes opportunities open up for you that you've written off, and then suddenly they present themselves, and you've got to catch those moments. So examples would be, I'd kind of more or less given up kayaking, to be honest, after having my family, and then ended up in Cornwall and retired, and I didn't know what to do. And then suddenly I'm paddling around. That was definitely not on the agenda. And coming back from that experience, I got in touch with Darrell, and now we're kind of working with him and doing podcasts. And again, that was, if you asked me 5 years ago, are you going to be canoeing around British Isles and doing podcasts? That was not going to happen. So that's one of the things I've learned from going around Ireland is, don't be afraid to talk to people because they generally quite nice. And what I'm doing, the advice I'm giving to my sons at the moment, I did a pretty good job of bringing them up, but because I didn't realise myself, this is the advice I'm passing on to them now. It's all about networking and knowing lots of people. Because I used to sit at home and make air fixes and was a right little nerd, and now I realise that the more people you know, the more opportunities come your way. So, and it's not, sometimes it's not so good. Sometimes I just want to be sitting in front of the telly, switching the brain off. But I think you should, once a month, go out and meet a whole new bunch of people, and just for the fun of it, not with an intention, of anything coming out of it, but then suddenly opportunities will open, and if you just say yes and you're open to them, which might mean abandoning your dream. You might not end up in your house. You might end up working in NASA or something, or becoming TikTok stars. I don't know. Keep your options open. That's my advice.
I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
So,
Yeah, thanks.
Right, so that seems to be a good moment to end the show. So
Mikey's wisdom is the perfect place to end.
yes, well, we better start before I make it into a law. So it's been a real pleasure talking to you both, and we'll have to have you on round about episode 150 to see how you've got on again.
Oh, brilliant.
It's been an absolute pleasure. So
Yeah,
thank you so much
likewise.
for
I've
having
really
us.
enjoyed it.
Yeah,
So-
great talking to you. Good to meet you.
So it's bye from Mikey.
Right then, for me.
Right. Cheerio.
Bye, guys.
Thanks
Bye.
ever so much.
See ya.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks.